A while back, I made a video on how empires work. In it, I outlined some tools and methods by which empires and their governments exert force and control their populations. But the truth of the matter is, that is not how empires work. That is how governing works. That is how rule works. Just as I said of empires, force is quintessential to rule. Other states are no different. People are ruled by force, conquered or consenting. The commanders of the obvious among you will point out that your government of your happy little Western democracy doesn't have legions stationed all around the country to put down regional rebellions, as I might have given the impression in my imperialism video. As I said of empires, they must prevent violence before it happens. This is even more the case for non-imperial states. Historically, empires have the option of exterminating, exiling, and resettling populations in their empire that are perhaps troublesome. This option isn't available for non-imperial states. The people they exterminate, the people they resettle, the people they exile are your neighbors, and when you destroy them root and stem, they will remember, and the people who knew them will remember. So, if ruling people is such a forceful task, how then do states, imperial or otherwise, resolve the enormous force required to govern people? As I mentioned of avenues with the empires, one avenue available to all states is law and school. Law is the system by which the country is to operate. If that sounds extremely general, it's because it's supposed to be. Every nation can design its laws to make room for all sorts of unique institutions. But the core factor must be that the system by which the country operates is relatively consistent. This way there is an avenue for your citizenry to pursue and advocate for their own interests. This way there does not need to be a legion stationed for every interest group in the entire country. Similar to taking the road instead of the shortcut through the dark, scary woods. School as a tool of governing is a long-term investment. And when I say school, I mean a state-sponsored system of education. Democracies that hope to see the light of day will have education systems, but how extensive education systems will be in a given country can vary widely. Schooling for someone such as myself from the great country of Canada is a highly extensive system in the grand scheme of history. I get taught almost every day, for most of the day, on a wide variety of topics for many years of my early life. What I learn and how long I learn is all decided by the state. By having a standardized, state-controlled education, you are, in a way, standardizing the citizenry of your country. So those old hippies from back in the day who used to say that the government is brainwashing your mind, well, they're kind of right. Remember how I said law represents the system by which the country will operate? School is how you get your citizenry to fit into and operate, wholly or in part, the system by which the country operates. School will be the place where the citizenry will learn about the avenue that allows them to pursue their interests. Where people will learn to vote with their ballots and not their armies. How extensive a schooling system is, how much you learn, can vary widely from country to country. As I said, Canada in the grand scheme of history represents one of the more extensive systems of education. We learn about the avenue on which we can pursue our interests, in my case, votes, or the political system at large, but we also learn skills for making a life for ourselves in this country. And sometimes some of the things we learn are just for making us well-rounded people. The education system of many Greek city-states was intended to prepare people, their citizenry, for military service and intellectual pursuits. Things like your occupation, your means of living, would be taught to you by your family, not by the school. Effectively, the point was to give their citizenry some standardized skills that would prove useful to the state, like the ability to fight in a war, and intellectual pursuits so that their citizens don't embarrass them when they go off to other places. In terms of extensiveness, relatively speaking, in the grand scheme of history, it's somewhat more moderate. It's not teaching you everything you need to get by, but it's teaching you the things that the state will require of you. It should be noted, in the grand scheme of history, The standard is there is no education system. In fact, we live in a relatively odd time in that so many countries are just sort of expected to have education systems. In history, if we do find an education system, often it's extremely minimalistic. To conclude, the education system is a somewhat mold for your citizenry. What do you need people to be able to fit into? And the law is the machine on which those molded citizens must fit themselves into, must be slotted to make function.